Welcome to another episode of Spin Weekly. My name is Grace Shalom Hopkins. Today we are doing one of my favorite techniques. It's the Landscap Rolag technique. I've showed you this a couple of times before, but primarily in the Batt. It remains one of my most visually appealing techniques. And it's also the technique I go to when I'm looking to access more of a raw, primal, childlike, judgment-free creativity. If I need to channel the good stuff, this is where I go. And this particular one is a good example of how the landscape technique in my books or my recipe cards can be applied to anything. I also have in my book card a recipe about how to be inspired, and that follows a similar process. So if you have my book card, or if you have the recipe cards, I've linked all of them down below, but if you already have them, those are the ones that I'm referencing here. And if you are a $10 or $15 a month Patreon person, you get them for the month of June. So if you want to be a $10 or $15 person to get these cards, you can go ahead and sign up in the links down below. I kind of lost my train of thought halfway through there. When I'm telling information, my brain is already like, let's tell him the cool stuff about my thoughts and feelings behind it, but then also chronologically convey information so it's like understandable and actually helpful. It's complicated to be in my brain. Anyway. So, I'm doing the voiceover for all of you guys here on YouTube, and that's unusual. You guys know I usually do the voiceover for the Patreon people, and the Patreon people this month are getting the music video version. I did that because it is my birthday month, and I wanted to kind of celebrate not only the Patreon makeover to make it more accessible to more kinds of people, but also celebrate one of my favorite techniques and share it with you guys in a more transparent way. All kinds of cool stuff. So that was kind of my thought there. So about the actual technique, I have this deck of cards called A Deck for Wonder Walking, and they're designed by this lady, Amy T. Wan, I have left links down below, to really train your mind to look at the natural environment from new perspectives. So you can draw a card when you're going on a walk or going to like a museum or any kind of hands-on experience. And I guess it doesn't even have to be hands-on. It could be like reading a book. Anything you're doing, and then it will give you kind of a creative word or short phrase, and you can use that lens to noodle what you're taking in. And that's really similar to how I want to present all of my work, all of my videos, all of my books, all of my recipe cards. Everything I do creatively is designed to help you be the boss of your colorway, help you approach a fiber and see it from all different angles and really sink into the scope of the imagination of the thing from many different perspectives. And I feel like a lot of our culture around not just craftiness, but just in general, sort of discourages us from thinking really outside of the box. We have children who have memories of coloring a giraffe purple, and their teacher was like, giraffes aren't purple. What the heck? You're fired, teacher. Clearly. What? Have you ever even learned about human development? Like, go away. So all of my stuff is trained to get you out of that box of the different perspectives that are available to you. There's an infinite number of perspectives available to you. You just have to find them and apply them. Find and apply, because sometimes we have fear around applying. But anyway, so this deck for wonder walking is a similar idea. So what I did was I picked out the colors I wanted first. I had this kind of watery, sunsetty vibe going on because I've really been watching Amara Moon because we did that collaboration for the Tour de Fleece, which you can still get the colorway there. I've left links to her shop down below. And then if you're following me on Instagram, you've been seeing some sneak peeks of what I'm doing there. And I'll actually insert a little clip of my spin so you can't see anything of my super secret technique right here. I'm pointing down below, but it's going to be here. You're seeing it now. voiceover magic. Isn't this beautiful? I think you're gonna be so excited to see this thing. So anyway, I've been inspired by her perspective. She does a lot of colorways that are inspired by pictures. And a lot of her pictures are very moody, sunsetty, I feel like. Her Father's Day colorway, definitely moody, sunsetty. I'll leave links down to that too. So anyway, I picked out the colors first. And then I spread out the deck all over the floor with the help of the bean, and we chose some cards that matched the colors, kind of. And I did end up having to tweak a little bit, but I knew that was coming. So right there, that's interesting to choose the colors prior to the inspiration piece. So already I'm mixing up what is classically considered the correct way to be inspired. So, and then I just copied the picture onto the blending board. And because this is a voiceover, I'm gonna go ahead and talk more about that with the actual video. But before we even got there, I wanted to explain the steps that I did before, because I didn't film picking out the cards or the fiber colors because the angles of that would be boring. I mean, I suppose I could make something cinematic with picking fiber, but I didn't. So you're stuck with this. My filming is slowly developing. I actually found, a side note, that I had a Skillshare subscription that I got for my brother last year for his birthday, and I have a month left, and I forgot I even had it. So I'm going through all of the personal finance classes, because you guys know I'm getting out of the military. My husband is getting out of the military. I would make a terrible military person on all accounts, including the fact that I'm a pacifist. But anyway. And have you seen this hair? This is not in regulations. But yeah, so I'm taking all the personal finance classes and all of the videography classes. So you guys might not see the benefits too much of my personal finance flexing, but hopefully you'll see some visual enhancement. You probably already have. I'm starting to make more cuts and be more flowy. Hopefully you're enjoying that. But anyway, that's off topic here. On to the voiceover, and I'll meet you on the other side. Alright, so here we have the little card that I used from the deck for Wonder Walking, and you can see the fiber that I initially pulled out. So right away you're probably noticing that there's some orange that doesn't really fit, so I didn't end up using that. You also can see that my blending board is a little dirty. I probably should have cleaned it first. But I began to lay down the different colors, not necessarily working on particular layers, and I didn't have layers planned out except for the fact that I was using layers. So I don't know, that doesn't make sense. So the card itself is watercolor. There's a lot of really intense layering going on, and I wanted to mimic that in the fiber itself. Because of that, I just kind of pulled out different parts of the card and didn't go in like chronological layers. So if I was dividing the actual painting up into layers from top to bottom, I would have done this differently. But instead, I was just choosing the different colors and textures that worked well for me. The penis putting pens and toilet paper beside me. So because this is a first layer, I wanted to also be mindful to keep some of the tiniest pieces of fiber that would get stuck to the board up more towards the middle or the top. I'm also only roughly working with the shapes here. So you can see that, again, I'm not being super literal in either color or shape or layering. And I think that's where the inspiration becomes a lot more joyful rather than stressful. I also see a lot of people who are interested in doing an inspired by thing that get really hyper focused on one kind of inspiration. Like a classic would be a Gryffindor. Okay, we'll say Gryffindor colorway, and it's red and gold. Okay, that's fine. But what about all the other different perspectives you could have? You could be inspired by the lion, and not just his colors, but also, you know, the texture of his mane. And you could be inspired by the fire in the common room. There's so many different perspectives, right? And I think that the techniques are really lively and organic if you mix several together. So even if you just did an intense matching of the red and gold, I wouldn't just do an exact, like I pulled the Pantone color card for exactly Gryffindor red and exactly Gryffindor gold and make it flat. That would be drab. Unless you're actually spinning your Gryffindor uniform, you don't want to do that. Instead, you could get several different depths in there. You could try some different fiber texture, you know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm going for here. I'm not just copying the colors exactly or the form exactly. I'm trying to mimic the overall feeling of the thing, and then also imagining the feeling of the thing that the painting is of. That's a lot of ofs. So anyhow, like I was saying before, multiple perspectives is really the key that I'm going for, and they're not organized. I don't have a formula like 30% literalism and 12.754% texture. That's not how this rolls. So anyway, as I'm laying these fibers, you can see I am playing with color and texture and shape. Before, there was a lot of really intense sweeping of the gold across and the white at the top, but now I'm moving things around. The gold is more in the corner and the blue is starting to take over. So when you actually spin it, you'll have a more organic flow, which will capture the thing that I was trying to portray more accurately. And because I'm doing a really big Rolag bat, I'm just pulling this off like it was a drum carded bat. I'm a lot more free to treat it almost like several individual pictures layered on top of each other. So that's really interesting. I haven't done this technique in this way with a blending board before. I've done Rolags, but I thought pulling it off like a bat enabled me to be almost like a, what are they called, palindromes? I think it's a palindrome. Well, that's gonna bother me when you have several things written on top of each other. Yes. I've just read The Discovery of Witches. Shout out if you've read that book, you know what I'm referencing. No spoilers. So as I'm rolling it off, you can see already the different contrast between the top layer and the bottom layer, but you knew that there was several even beyond that in the middle. So that's what I was trying to do. It might look like a mistake, but that was my goal. I was aiming for that. So also you'll notice technique-wise, here I'm doing a roll-off method, and I do have some of that white, which was a silk base, and I know it's gonna be a little sticky. So you can do it like this, where you roll it off, or you can do it in the way that I show with the next one. But, I guess it's gonna be a while. I paused to show you, and then I was like, duh, you're gonna see the, the beginning of this new one. Anyhow, so I did a second one with this colorway, or this card inspiration, I guess. My expecting it to be rolled off totally stole my train of thought. So you can see another way that I've interpreted this. Again, I'm not literally following the pattern on the card. I am being inspired by different parts. So at this point, I'm kind of going with a lighter part first, and then pulling through some of the darker bits that were in the yellow that I didn't get before. So I'm pulling out individual contrasts. And again, this is really like from the gut. I don't really think this out, and I find when I really plan things out aggressively, it becomes less good. And that's why I love this technique so much. It doesn't lend itself to over planning. It lends itself to just listening to the fiber and the inspiration and going with it. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn on some music for you until we get to the next colorway, because I've kind of talked you through what I wanted to say about this one. And yeah. So this one is a little different. Again, you see a lot of oranges and reds that I ended up not using. Also, I'm cleaning my blending board a little bit, but still not very thoroughly. This one's a lot more moody. It's in a similar zone. The pink has replaced kind of that greeny sea color. But if you'll notice, the two have a very similar movement across the board, which, as you can see, was a main feature for me. I really picked up on that and felt like they would be cool together. So I'm sending these to my last Patreon person. She opted for every 3 months because she lives in South Africa. Shout out to you. And so I'm envisioning her spinning the two lighter ones and the two darker ones and then plying it together, which of course she can do whatever she wants with it, but that's the vision that I have. And so I wanted two really compatible but slightly different colorways. So again, I'm pulling things that called to me in a non-chronological way, and I'm really following that dramatic line across the center, even though I'm building over the top of it, which is interesting because that means that it won't be solidary. You'll have several different things going on when you get to that portion of the bat. And one of the things I hate the most is if you are spinning something and you have one solid color as if it was from a machine in one place. Every single centimeter of my yarn, in my opinion, should have a blend of different colors or textures. So I'm layering in a blended top that was kind of a deep navy, almost emerald And then I put alpaca that was black over the top, and I'm putting down the darkest of the pinky purples. And again, purple's not really in the card itself, but it's something that I wanted to bring in for depth, because of course fiber plays differently than watercolors do. So you have to also be familiar with your medium and manipulate it to work well. So it lends itself to layering in a really organic, smooth, almost sheer way. But in order to get that vibe, you have to use certain kinds of color. So a lighter pink, I think, would have blended on top of the others and made it seem very pastel or almost ghosty, maybe a little ashen. And I didn't want that for this. So I went with a darker, more dusty color to bring in this sort of somber tones, but also not wash it out. No ghosty fiber here. So yeah, well, here's an example of a really light one, but you can see it's got a pretty intense pink when I pulled it out, but when I lay it across the board, it almost reads as white. So if I had gone with an actual pastel, that would have read as just, you know, non-existent. So yeah. Anyway, I think I've pretty much told you what I wanted to tell you about this spin, so I'm going to turn on the music and let you enjoy it, and I'll meet you for the little pull-off part that I was telling you about before. So here we're going to take it off, and you can tell that I've completely disregarded the pattern of the card at the bottom. So that's another example of just doing what I want to do. So when you roll it off, you'll notice that the top wants to get stuck to the pins, and if you lay a light tea towel over the top, that's a way to prevent that from happening. So I was not as careful, as you can see, when I laid down the first layer. I just went with my gut rather than really carefully avoiding the stringy fibers. So there you go. That's how I used the tea towel to pull it off, and I hope you enjoyed. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that video. If you have any thoughts or feelings or anything, questions, leave them in the comments down below as per usual. I do get to the Patreon comments faster, and there's actually a section where people who are not Patreon people, I post this like YouTube version on Patreon just so I have like a consistent record of what I'm doing, and it has a comment section too. So I'm more likely to see that just because I'm on Patreon already, paying fealty to the Patreon family. So, and if you have a pressing question, you can just contact me on Instagram. That's really the fastest way to get a hold of me. Or if you have like a serious question, you could always go on my webpage and hit the contact me, and that goes directly to my email. That's like for boots on kind of questions. Anyway, if you liked this video, hit the like button. If you want to keep on keeping on with these shenanigans that I have here in my rambly intros and outros, hit the subscribe button. I would appreciate it. There are many of you now growing every video. It's so exciting. And as per usual, a huge shout out to the Patreon people. If you haven't already gathered in this video, Patreon family is the heartbeat of the show. And in addition to the Patreon people, everybody who buys books, everybody who buys spinning wheels, somebody bought a king bee from me last week. Ooh, I am excited to place that order and send it to you. You know who you are. I love to hook you up with the coolest stuff, the best spinning wheels I know, and my books, both digital and physical. I'm just an enabler. So you guys enable me to do life, and I enable you to do creative stuff, and I appreciate that symbiotic relationship. So until next time, bye!